Okay, I've drawn up a 9-card hand for the Jihadist. I'm going to take a look at it here momentarily just to see what my options are. One of the first things that I'm going to have to do is I've got to look at my situation in the world, and all my cells are presently either on the funding track or they're in Afghanistan. Anytime the Jihadist player wants to do something, he has to typically dice against the governance of the country that he wants to perform that operation. For example, if I wanted to recruit cells in Pakistan, I'd have to dice against the governance rating of that country, and I'd have to roll less than or equal to that governance. Whenever you have an Islamist rule country, however, those dice rolls are considered to be automatically successful, which is why the Islamist rule governance marker does not have a number on it. So one of the first things a Jihadist player is typically going to do is he's typically going to draw up a bunch of cards. And yeah, let's draw up a bunch of cards or cells and put them into Afghanistan because it's free. The problem is I drew a really crummy hand for doing this. So let's see what we want to do here. Well, let's start off things with a bang here. We're going to take Kosovo, and we're going to recruit with that. So that'll put a cell into Afghanistan. Now, here's how this is going to work. I'm choosing the op value of the card, I'm ignoring the event, and I'm going to choose a recruit operation. To recruit, the number of cells I can potentially recruit is the op value of the card. In this case, I played a 1-op card, so I can recruit 1 cell. Because I'm recruiting in Afghanistan, it's automatically successful. I can only recruit in Afghanistan at the moment because there are no cells anywhere else on the board. In order to recruit, you must have a cell or a cadre marker in the target country. And since that's not the case at present, that's all I can do for this particular card play. What makes this game very different from other card-driven games is that each player is going to play 2 cards in sequence. I'm going to play a card, resolve it entirely, and then up at the top of the track here, top of the map, you'll see there's a play sequence track. And I'm going to move the marker over to Jihadist card 2. So now I can play a second card, resolve it entirely, and go from there. So what to do with this? For my second card, I'm going to play Danish cartoons, and I'm going to use the op value again. I don't want to use the event. And this time I'm going to use a travel operation. And what this is going to do is it's going to cause one of my cells to travel to any country on the board. It doesn't even have to be adjacent. You can see that this is a point-to-point map, and clearly there are countries that are adjacent to one another. However, I do not have to move adjacent. I can move anywhere I want. However, if the Jihadist player moves cells non-adjacent, I have to dice against the governance of the target country that I'm moving to in order to determine whether traveling is successful. If I fail, the cell is destroyed and put back on the funding track. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to travel from Afghanistan, and I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to travel to an adjacent country, and I'm going to send them up to Central Asia. And what that will do is it's going to do a number of things. First of all, a cell can be in 2 different states. It could be active or it could be sleeper. Cells that are active have a star and crescent on the top. In the physical game, it's like a metallic green color. In this game, it's white. And whenever you travel, an active cell automatically goes sleeper when you travel. You can even travel within the country. So if I wanted to, I could leave him in Afghanistan and simply travel him in place, which would cause the cell to flip over. What's the advantage of being sleeper? Sleeper cells take 2 cards for the US player to eliminate back to the funding track, whereas an active cell is more vulnerable, easier to kill. But so that's how you're going to get a cell from active to sleeper and so forth. What I'm doing here is I'm traveling to an adjacent country, which means it's automatically successful. The target country is unmarked. There's no governance marker there, so the first thing we have to do is dice on a table to find out what the governance of the country is going to be. And there's a 2/3 chance that the country is going to have poor governance. A 1 through 4 means he's got poor governance. A 5 or 6 means he has fair governance. So I roll a dice and I roll a 6. So that's going to mark it with fair governance, which is good for Mike. and the U.S., and we'll go ahead and mark that on the country. And the alignment is automatically considered to be neutral. So that was my opening play.
Yay for the good guys.
And then we adjust the fair good countries down on the victory track. And I'll discard my cards and hand it over to Mike.
Alright, well, for the first card play for the U.S., I will use this one, NATO, and I will use it for the 3 ops. And we will immediately go in and show you how a regime change works. In Afghanistan, I want to switch Afghanistan, get it out of Islamist rule, and what I must do is deploy 6 of my troops from one location into Afghanistan. So I have to take them from the troop track up on top because the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia only have 2 each, and I need to bring in 6 from one location.
Regime change is considered to be a special form of deployment. Deployment is the means by which U.S. player is going to move his troops from one country to another. You can only do a regime change in an Islamist rule country. You can only do a regime change if the U.S. player is considered to be under hard posture vis-a-vis the war on terror. Now, whenever you do that regime change, there's a number of things that are going to happen which could be good or bad. The first thing that happens is all my cells in the target country go active. The governance of the country is going to change. He's going to dice for that in a minute, and the country is automatically going to become a U.S. ally.
So we'll go ahead and roll the die to see what they are, and they are going to go poor. 1 through 4, it'll become a poor ally.
So I lose my resources down on the victory track. The Islamist resources, we no longer have any resources because now the country of Afghanistan is considered ally, and it's considered to be poor, and it's marked with regime change. Regime change freezes troops in the country. You cannot deploy troops out of a regime change unless you have a surplus over the number of cells in the country. If you have it, you have to have at least 5 more troops than cells in the country in order to take any troops out. This action of Mike's is also going to cause the troop marker to move over to the war status box on the troop track. So he's only going to get an 8-card draw at the end of this turn. And the next thing he's got to do is he's got to roll for U.S. posture to find out if U.S. prestige to find out if U.S. prestige goes up or down based on this action.
Oh, lucky for me, a 5 or 6 it goes up, and I roll a 6. There was a better chance of it going down with a 1 through 4.
To determine the extent of the shift, you roll 2 dice and you take the lower of the 2. So Mike is going to be sitting pretty at very high prestige. Wow, that's like the best start I've seen in a long time, Mike.
Yeah, that's pretty lucky. Believe me, it's not good play, it's just luck.
Yeah, that almost never happens.
Okay, and now for my second play, which the reason why I did this was I want to play a card that that has some prerequisites, and it's a nasty one for him. But I had to get no Islamist-ruled countries. Bin Laden, U.S. must play with no Islamist rule, Fatah or Al-Anbar. It will be -4 to the funding, +1 to prestige, and this card will be removed from the game.
Well, that's harsh. Let's see, I lose how much? 4 funding? Yeah, ouch. And that gets Bin Laden out of the deck. This is one of those split event cards. If the Jihadist player plays the card for the event, the card is not removed. So if you're having a multi-deck game, pulling Bin Laden out of play on the first deck is a really big deal, because he's really tough to get. If you can't get him right away in Afghanistan, he's most vulnerable early, which is kind of historical here. So an interesting turn of events here for the for the Jihadists. We're definitely in trouble here.
And it's your play.
Yeah, what to do, huh?
Yeah, sorry about that. That was pretty brutal. When I saw those two come up, I was like, ooh, that's going to hurt.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Now, there are a couple ways that you can get rid of a dangerous card. If you wanted to play a card, but you don't want the event to trigger in Twilight Struggle, you could send it to the space race. Well, in this game, what the Jihadist player can do is the first card he uses to plot with, which he uses the ops value to plot with, I should say, goes into the first plot marker box on the map, and the event is not triggered. So that's one safe way that you can go about, getting your dangerous events out of your hand. So what I'm going to do here, man, this is really tough. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off with Martyrdom Operation. And I'd really like to recruit some more cells, but I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to resolve the event, which will make things interesting for Mike. I'm going to play Martyrdom Operation, and what this is going to do is it's going to kill one of my cells. So one of my cells here is going to go back to the funding track. And then I get to put 2 plot markers down, and we'll go ahead and put those on the board here. Alright, I've drawn 2 of these out. Now I get to look at the other sides of these. Each plot marker has a value from 1 to 3, and I get to look at those and see what they are, and I place them face down in the target country. They can only be removed via the alert operation played by the U.S. So if he plays alert, he can flip those over, look at them, and put them back in my available plots. If it's a WMD that is discovered, then it is removed from the game. Now at the beginning of the game, there are no WMDs in play. The Jihadist player can acquire them from Central Asia, Russia, which is indicated by the little skull and bones notation on those countries. There are different events that will give you WMDs if you have cells in those countries, which is why I put a cell in Central Asia. If Pakistan goes Islamist rule, then all 3 WMD markers of the Pakistani arsenal come into the Jihadist player's hand, which can be very dangerous. And the reason I did this is putting plots down. Plots, when they go off, they increase your funding. And my funding's basically in the toilet right now, and I need to get that back up, and so I'm hoping to make some hay there. So that's my first card play. And I'm trying to decide what my next card play will be, because I've got a mess in my hand. Well, my next card, I'm going to have to play this, Moro Talks, which is going to cause the event to trigger. It's going to block Abu Sayyaf. I'm just going to go ahead and let you trigger the event right away here. My funding is going to take another hit. And Mike, you may go ahead and test the Philippines. Alright, Philippines is soft. So that kind of helps me a little bit. The GWAT marker now slides to the 0 space, so there's no negative modifiers to Mike yet. But if another country goes soft, there'll be a -1 modifier to War of Ideas, which is something I'm a little concerned about. I'm going to use the op value. As you can see, I drew a dandy of a hand here to go ahead and recruit that cell that just died. I'm going to recruit another cell and put him into Afghanistan. Cells that are recruited are automatically sleeper. They're always placed on as sleeper, as are cells at the beginning of a scenario setup. So he's back in play. The event is then removed. And Moro Talks is going to block a really cool jihadist event known as Abu Sayyaf, which is unfortunate, but this was a necessary card play. So back over to Mike.